Welcome to Inside British Royals. This is your exclusive look inside the world's most famous family. We are exploring the scandals, secrets, and power plays that define the modern monarchy. If you are new here, please do well to hit that subscribe button for more updates. In the quiet, wealthy lanes of Berkshire, not far from Windsor Castle, sits the ghost of royal extravagance. Sunninghill Park, a massive mansion gifted by the Queen to Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson for their wedding, has been the subject of whispers for decades. One of the most persistent, almost cinematic rumors is of a secret panic button hidden within its walls, a special tool for a prince under siege. But the real story of this house is far more alarming than any security gadget. The true panic isn't about what might have been inside the house, but about how it was sold. It's a story that starts with a wedding gift and spirals into a dark tale of international money, shady characters, and a shocking number of red flags that point to potential corruption at the highest levels. Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson's former £15 million marital home reportedly had a panic button. But the real panic isn't what was inside the house. It's how it was sold. The mansion sat on the market, unwanted, for years. Then, out of nowhere, it was bought by a mysterious Kazakh billionaire for £3 million over the asking price. The search for why uncovers a secret that goes far beyond a simple panic button, involving an international bribery scheme and a royal at the very center of it all. To understand the scandal, you first have to understand the house. Sunninghill Park wasn't just a home, it was a statement. Built for the newly married Duke and Duchess of York in 1986, it was a gift from the Queen on land carved from the Crown estate. With 12 bedrooms and 12 bathrooms, it was meant to be a modern royal palace. The public and architecture critics, however, were not impressed. Its red brick, sprawling design was quickly torn apart, earning it some unflattering nicknames. The tabloids called it South York, a sneering comparison to the gaudy South Fork Ranch from the TV soap opera Dallas. Others, even less kindly, said it looked like a brand new Tesco supermarket. It was a symbol of 1980s excess that never quite fit the public's idea of royal tradition. For Andrew and Fergie, it was their family home, where they raised their daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie. But after their divorce in 1996, the house started to feel less like a home and more like a liability. Sarah Ferguson and the princesses moved out around 2004, relocating to the nearby Royal Lodge and leaving Andrew as the sole resident of the massive mansion. By 2006, the house was completely empty, a silent monument to a failed marriage and a bygone era. Andrew, it seemed, needed to sell. And so began a long and frustrating chapter for the property. In the world of high-end real estate, location is everything. And Sunninghill Park, tucked away in Berkshire's stockbroker belt near Ascot, should have been an easy sell. Yet, when it was officially put on the market with a £12 million price tag, a strange thing happened: absolutely nothing. For years, the house just sat there. Potential buyers came and went, but no one would make an offer. The once gleaming royal home began to fall into disrepair. Weeds grew through the paving stones, paint peeled from the walls, and grass poked through the cover of the empty swimming pool. Doors were seen hanging open, windows were broken, and the whole place took on an air of general dereliction. This wasn't just embarrassing, it was a financial problem. The house was a money pit, and its failure to sell was a very public flop. Local real estate agents were baffled. Properties of this size and in this location were, and still are, highly sought after. But the former royal home sat vacant and decaying. It got so bad that Bracknell Forest Borough Council even considered seizing the property under the Housing Act to use as a homeless shelter. A truly stunning fall from grace for a former royal palace. It seemed Prince Andrew was stuck with a £12 million white elephant that nobody wanted. And then, out of the blue, a buyer didn't just appear. He showed up with an offer that was almost too good to be true. The mysterious savior who finally stepped up in 2007 was Timur Kulibayev. Now, this wasn't just any rich businessman. Kulibayev was the son-in-law of Nursultan Nazarbayev, the long-ruling, autocratic president of Kazakhstan. This immediately puts him into a special category financiers call a politically exposed person, or PEP. That's a term for people whose prominent public roles mean they carry a higher risk for potential involvement in bribery and corruption. Kulibayev was a giant in Kazakhstan's economy, holding powerful jobs in the country's state-owned oil and gas industry. He was, and is, an oligarch of incredible wealth and influence, sometimes called the Oil Prince. His connections weren't just political. They were deeply tied to the resource-rich economy of a nation that, even back then, was known for systemic corruption. In fact, just months before the sale, Britain's own Europe Minister, Jeff Hoon, had warned Parliament that allegations of systematic corruption in Kazakhstan were rife. At first, Kulibayev's role was kept quiet. The purchase was made through an offshore company registered in the secretive British Virgin Islands, a classic move to ensure anonymity. The first name that popped up was Kenz Rakishev, another young Kazakh businessman who claimed he'd negotiated the deal but insisted he wasn't the owner. It took journalists years to definitively confirm that Timur Kulibayev was the one who ultimately owned it. So, the question that should have been asked right away was, why was the son-in-law of the Kazakh president, a major player in a country with a reputation for corruption, so interested in a decaying, unsellable mansion in Berkshire? And more importantly, why was he willing to pay so much for it? The final sale price of Sunninghill Park was £15 million. That was £3 million more than the £12 million asking price Prince Andrew couldn't get for years. Some estimates even suggest the overpayment was more dramatic, with the final price being as much as £7 million above what the property was actually worth at the time. This is the central mystery, the screaming red flag at the heart of this whole affair. Think about it logically. A house sits empty and rotting for half a decade. Its owner is a famous public figure who clearly wants to get rid of it. Then, a buyer with deep political connections to a notoriously corrupt regime not only meets the asking price, but blows past it by a staggering 25%. It begs the question that investigators and journalists have been asking ever since. What was actually being bought for that extra £3 million? Was it just a 12-bedroom house with a leaky pool? Or was it something else? Was it access? Influence? Goodwill from a member of the British royal family who, at that very moment, was also serving as the UK's special representative for international trade and investment? Prince Andrew himself seemed totally unbothered. When asked about the eyebrow-raising price in a 2009 interview, his response was shockingly dismissive. "It's not my concern once the price is paid. If that is the offer, I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth and suggest they have overpaid." For anti-corruption campaigners, this wasn't a gift horse. It was a Trojan horse, and what was inside was deeply troubling. When money laundering experts look at the sale of Sunninghill Park, they don't just see one red flag. They see a whole parade of them. Tom Kietinge, director of the Center for Finance and Security and a leading expert on money laundering, described the deal as having blatant red flags that should have set off alarm bells everywhere. First, the most obvious one, the massive overpayment. As we've covered, paying millions more than the asking price, especially for a derelict property, is highly unusual and a classic sign that a deal may not be what it appears to be. Second, the buyer's profile. Timur Kulibayev was a textbook politically exposed person, PEP. Financial rules, both then and now, demand extra thorough checks for deals involving PEPs because their position and influence make them more vulnerable to bribery and corruption. The fact that the buyer was the son-in-law of a sitting president of a country known for corruption should have been a major warning. Third, the use of offshore companies. The purchase was made not by Kulibayev directly, but through a shell company called Unity Assets Corporation, registered in the British Virgin Islands. Back in 2007, UK property law didn't require the disclosure of who really owned these offshore entities, allowing Kulibayev's identity to stay hidden for 3 years. Using anonymous offshore companies is a hallmark of money laundering, designed to hide the true source of funds. Fourth, and maybe most damning, is where the money came from. An explosive BBC investigation in early 2026 uncovered a truly shocking connection. Through his lawyers, Kulibayev admitted that he used a loan to help buy Sunninghill. That loan came from a company called Enviro Pacific Investments. This is where it gets dark. In a separate investigation, Italian prosecutors had concluded that this exact same company, Enviro Pacific Investments, had received money that was the proceeds of a bribery scheme. Court documents from Italy revealed a complex web. An Italian oil executive pled guilty to paying bribes to Kazakh officials, including Kulibayev, in exchange for lucrative contracts. The bribe money was funneled through a company called Avental. And where did some of that money from Avental go? Straight to Enviro Pacific Investments. The timing is staggering. The final payment from the bribery-linked company to Enviro Pacific was made in April 2007. Less than 2 months later, in June 2007, the contracts for the sale of Sunninghill Park were exchanged. Kulibayev's lawyers have consistently denied that he has ever been involved in bribery and insist the funds used to buy the house were entirely legitimate. But for investigators, the chain is clear. Funds linked to a confirmed bribery scheme flowed into the company that provided the loan to buy Prince Andrew's house, just weeks before the deal was done. Faced with this mountain of suspicious circumstances, the response from the main players has been a masterclass in deflection and silence. Timur Kulibayev, through his army of lawyers, has consistently and fiercely denied any and all allegations of wrongdoing. He insists he was never bribed, knew nothing about any corrupt scheme, and that all the funds for the purchase were legitimate. The overpayment, they claim, was just a business decision to fend off a rival bidder. And what about Prince Andrew? As the UK's special representative for international trade and investment, his job was to champion British business abroad. This role saw him take official, taxpayer-funded trips to Kazakhstan. In fact, in the very same month that the sale of Sunninghill Park was completed, royal records show a chartered flight for the prince to visit Kazakhstan on official business. This overlap between his public duties and his private financial dealings raises profound questions about conflicts of interest. Did he use his publicly funded position to build a relationship that led to this incredibly lucrative private sale? When confronted with these suggestions, Buckingham Palace's response was swift and absolute. A spokesman stated the sale was a straight commercial transaction with no side deals, and that any suggestion he had abused his position was completely false. The royal family's lawyers, Farrer v. Co., who handled the sale, have cited client confidentiality and refused to comment. Andrew's own public statements have been just as unhelpful. His gift horse comment showed, at best, a shocking lack of curiosity about the origin of the £15 million that landed in his bank account. For a person in his position, especially a trade envoy meant to represent the UK, to see no problem with such a suspicious transaction is, for many, unforgivable. Margaret Hodge, the UK government's former anti-corruption champion, called the findings deeply troubling and demanded an investigation, stating bluntly that nobody is above the law. Yet, an official investigation has never happened. So let's go back to where we started, the panic button. The rumor of a panic button is, in the end, trivial, a piece of gossip. And maybe that's the point. It's a distraction. The bigger secret, the real scandal of Sunninghill Park, isn't a security gadget. It's that a property owned by a senior member of the British royal family became entangled in a web of international finance so murky that it has all the classic hallmarks of a textbook money laundering operation.